Hi, welcome back to Brooks's Bass Corner. I have a very special interview for you today with one of the greatest bass players on the planet. He's featured on over 2,000 albums and counting, and he's the owner of the greatest beard in the world of entertainment. It can be only one man, Mr. Leland Sklar. This interview dates back to April 2016 when he was here in London, and if you enjoy the interview, please hit the subscribe button below. Hit the notification bell so that you're notified when I release new videos, and please leave a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. If you have any comments, leave them in the box below and I'll come back to you as soon as I can. Enjoy the interview.
Yeah, well, but then I also tell them, I said, look, when there's a lottery, I said, they come on TV and they go, oh, odds are 175 million to 1 that anybody's going to win it. But the next day on TV, there's some guy standing there who just won the lottery. So I would look at him and I'd say, odds are you're not going to make it in this business, or it'll be a hobby or something. You'll develop relationships and all that. But I said, some cats in this room, I said, of these 200 in this room, there might be 3 that actually really have a career. I said, so you can't be dissuaded from it. You really have to go for it, and whatever happens, happens. But be prepared for it not to happen. So don't just think this is everything. Or if you're that passionate, then see it through. And then just whatever happens at the end of that journey happens. But I just did a bunch of albums. I did one with a guy and put together a great band like VIDIQ and all the cats, and we were at Capitol Records with the guy, and he had some nice little songs. And
saw your photos, yeah.
Well, that was probably a different thing. Oh. But I asked the guy after, I said, so what do you do normally? And he goes, well, my brother and I own Skechers shoes. You know, but these guys, they all have this passion that they've held their whole life. I have another friend who's an oral reconstructive surgeon, and he's a Martin and Dorsey. He has a Pro Tools studio in the basement of his dental clinic. Yeah. So he cuts his albums downstairs after work. I mean, and I've played on a bunch of his stuff. So there's always these kind of guys, but they have a contingency plan that they followed another path, but they kept their music. Yep. Man, when you're going, it's my life, it's everything, you could be fucked. In this day and age, it's really scary.
And that's the thing, I mean, you will have seen all of that progression, you know, from the 60s to now. And now we're getting to a point where they are in their 60s and 70s, and we have to, as a generation, be prepared that people we've looked up to all our lives are now going to pass on. Yeah. And it's just
shocking at the accelerated rate that it's happening too, because a lot of these people lived a lifestyle that they may have cleaned up years ago, but between their genetics and some of the abuse that they may have given their own systems, that they're really vulnerable at this point. Just like my dad passed away last year, and he was 91, and my mom's 91 now, and she's doing pretty good. But my expectation is you go at that point. But when I'm seeing, I mean, it kind of really, I mean, there were guys very early on. I mean, when I was in bands in the late 60s, we had a lead singer that shot meth and died of an overdose. Heavy feet. It must be a stewardess. You know, that was that clunk sound.
You're in London.
Yeah. But there were a few then, but really kind of when Jeff Porcaro died, that really, the ball really started rolling at that point, you know, and then Larry London right after him, and Carlos Vega, and a ton of drummers all went at that point. But we're seeing it more and more and more. When I sit there and I look at, you know, Jack Bruce and Entwistle, all these guys are gone. I just go, kidding me? This is it's like Mr. Ed.
You were there with a big pair of
going to the Derby. It's just really. I have expectations of it every single day. I mean, there hasn't been a week yet this year that I'm not hearing about somebody.
That's what it felt like in January. You know, from the point that Lemmy passed away, just at the end of sort of December, it was like every day there was another fate. And then we had people like Alan Rickman died, and it's just like, is this ever going to stop? It's every couple of days.
It's coming in a real flurry at this point. So Jeff, when they did his autopsy, his lungs and heart were like in the shape of an 80-year-old man in bad shape. And I think it was genetics, because he had 2 uncles who died young. Right. But I remember doing sessions with him shortly before he passed away, and like we'd finish a track and he'd be going, man, my arms are killing me. And it was pretty obvious in hindsight that it was circulation that was the problem. But the press jumped on. They said, oh, you know, he was did blow and all this. But the day he died, it was like 100 degrees in LA. And he was out spraying insecticide in his garden because he was an avid gardener, and had a heart attack. But you know, they want to play it into something more dramatic. But the weirdest thing for me was I had just finished this Tracy Chapman tour in Europe, flew back to LA, and when I got home, my answering machine had one light going, and it was my cartage company. And Judy at the cartage company said, "Lee, I don't know if you're back, but I heard something happened to Jeff." Didn't say really how catastrophic it was. And I ended up, I called Lukather, I called a bunch of guys, nobody was answering. I called Jeff's house, and Susan, his wife at that time, answered the phone. I said, "Hey Susan, it's Lee, I just got back in town," and somebody, before I could finish, he said, "He's dead." I mean, it was like just one of those things.
Was it an instant reaction?
I don't.
Because what we got told was it was an insecticide thing, he'd been in the garden, that was it, but I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, I think he had a heart attack at that point, it was over. But I seem to always be gone. It's like when Carlos killed himself, I was over here in Belgium working, and then my wife called me and said, "Man, I hope you're sitting down. Here's some bad news." Because he and I were, both those guys, I was with Jeff constantly in the studio for probably 12 years. And Carlos I'd been on the road with for years, you know, with James. So, you know, to suddenly find out that one of the happiest, coolest guys I know just shot himself is... But this happens, man. When we were doing our second Section album, we were in Clover Studios, and the second engineer, this great guy, we finished up recording. It was late at night, and he's going, "Man, what a great day, man. This is unbelievable. I can hardly wait for tomorrow." Left, went over to his house, put a shotgun in his mouth, and killed him, and blew his head off. What? I mean, not a sign, left happy. I mean, what the hell could have happened in this couple of hours? Because it was like 2 in the morning when we left the studio, and we were back at 10 in the morning, so somewhere during that period of time, something...
How was the Toto tour?
Toto, we're not done yet.
No, you've got some
we
more
still
in
got
the
US.
States, haven't you?
Yeah, we
and
start...
I might come over and see you.
Oh, great. Yeah, we start around August 10th, I think, till like September 18th or something like that. It's fantastic. You know, this time I felt better about doing it. The last time was all because of Mike.
Sure.
I mean, I kept writing him when they sent me the show to learn, and I kept writing him going, "Man, this is hard, man. You've really painted me into a corner here," and stuff. Because we've been friends since like 1970, so...
And Great Expectations is no easy tune to just wrap.
Man, so yeah, great. I mean, and plus there was no rehearsals for the tour.
Oh, really?
No, they said we already know the show, so just learn it. And the first time I ever played the set was on stage in Brussels. So I mean, I was like freaking. It was the same thing last time. I mean, when I toured with them last time, they called me and gave me 5 days to learn the show, and there was no rehearsal. One rehearsal for that one.
Really?
Moving the bodies out.
The corpses.
Yeah, they've got a gurney and just get some WD-40 for them. But it's great. I mean, I've known these guys. The thing I'm really enjoying about this run is, first off, there isn't having Joe back doing it is great. Shannon, I love playing with. Shannon I worked with in Nashville, and I worked on Michael McDonald's new record that he's engineering and co-producing with Michael. And his playing harkens so much to Jeff's playing. So I think for Toto's music, especially the early stuff, like doing stuff like Georgie Porgy, man, it's like so ridiculous. And having Paige and Steve Porcaro.
And Lenny Castro.
And Lenny, Lenny's been there forever, and I've known Lenny forever. And Mavuto and Jenny are great back. And it was so funny because just before I went out on the tour, I did this John Lennon 75th birthday at the Garden, and Jenny was one of the background singers on it. So we met for the first time there and kind of bonded on that gig before I got out on the road. So it's this weird kind of amorphous community.
I almost relate Toto now to it's the same kind of thing. It's like there's this library of players, and any of them are...
Except for Luke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like an interchangeable...
Yeah.
It's like modules.
Yeah, they're like Mr. Potato Head. I think I'll put different ears on them
Lego,
this week.
yeah. The band of Lego.
No, it's amazing because the depth of what they've got really is the music. And if you have great players, then you're going for it. And the thing that's great is the fan base accepts that. So no matter who they come out with, the people all show up. I mean, that was the great thing on Phil Collins' last tour, because the one thing we wanted to do was not play any place we'd ever played. So we went and we played Estonia and Latvia, went to Russia, went to the Middle East, and all these places where nobody expected him to ever show up. And we'd walk off the plane and he'd go, "I'm really here," press and freaking out. And we had the most unbelievable crowds for that tour, because and we came back to London and played. And when he just sat there reading the review, and they just buried him. They just talked about that he's announced his retirement. It can't come soon enough. Get this guy. It's just like the most scathing, hateful review. And we would always tell him, we said, "We just played for 60,000 people, and they wouldn't let you off the stage. And are you out of your go get therapy," kind of thing. But he would read every review. The only thing that really saved that whole thing was when we played Prague earlier. We had to cancel the show because we had just come from Russia, and he got incredibly sick in Russia. There was no way he could not squeak out a sound, let alone sing. So we canceled it, and we ended up doing it at the end of the tour, which wasn't great for so many people because they planned vacations and trips all around this one gig. But it was one of the greatest shows we ever played. And at the end, the audience is crying. I mean, it's like probably 80,000 people in this thing. I mean, it's an unbelievable gig. If we'd have ended on the English gig, which we were supposed to end on, he would.
I did Brian Ferry's tour last year. Jimmy Sims says hi, by the way.
I love Jimmy.
Spoke to him this morning.
Brothers in beards.
Yeah. But you did a show afterwards.
Yeah.
You did a journalist show. Was it at Judith's house?
At Judith's house.
Yeah.
Well, it was one of those situations that, I mean, she was so excited about playing the Albert Hall. I mean, I've played there a bunch of times, and you walk into these iconic. It's like Carnegie Hall or Budokan in Tokyo. There, certain ones just carry a weight of history.
Yeah.
And she was so thrilled about it. And literally, he canceled the show as people were getting in their seats.
10 to 7.
Yeah. I mean, there were people starting to come in, and we're going, "Are you kidding?" And all this. Another artist would have hung themselves in the back, freaking out over all this. And she's like the best at making lemonade out of a lemon. And she just, she was a lot of press there to see her.
Yep.
And the thing that was really great about this at the end of the day was, had Brian done his show that night, the review in the paper the next day would have been a Brian Ferry review, and at the bottom it would have said, and opening was Welsh singer Judith, and maybe they would have spelled her name wrong, kind of thing, and been done deal. Instead, she ended up with a stellar review the next day. So it was so great. She just said, "Look, I only live a mile from here. Here's like 50 people or 40 people that were there to see her," and we took them back to her place and did our show in her living room.
Right.
And the intimacy of that, sitting this close to the artist, you can't beat that. And they were talking, asking questions, hanging out, and all that. But that to me is what makes her a unique artist, that a lot of people would just fold under that kind of thing. She was incredibly disappointed only because she really wanted to play the Albert Hall.
On the new album, you got you on bass, you got Judith on piano, and you've got Gabriella on cello.
Yeah.
It's a lot of bottom end going there.
Yeah.
How do you mesh it all? So basically, what gets put down on record, do you then modify that into a live context? Because sometimes, piano player's left hand isn't always the bass player's favorite.
No,
friend,
she's. First off, you're dependent. Number one, when we made the album, you're dependent on the engineer having good enough ears to know how to separate things. A lot of Gabby's stuff on cello was more
bowed.
It was all bowed, and it was more mid-upper parts. And when she would be on the bottom end, you listen to an orchestra and you hear the basses, the cellos, violas, everybody's kind of working, and then, like bass clarinets and all. It's just how you approach it. And Dave Bianco, who engineered the album, is a really great engineer. I've done a lot of work with him over the years, so he's really good. Live, it's really up to the house mixer what happens. These gigs aren't so big that we're, really depending on a massive sound system and stuff. Most of the gigs are pretty intimate little rooms and stuff like that, and people can almost, I'm out here with an amp that's so small it would fit under this chair.
Your amp.
I'm using this is weird. when we were out with Brian, he offered Judith his studio to do some recording in. And we got there and I said, do you have a bass amp? Yeah, so there's one out in the dumpster in the back we were throwing out. It's this little PV amp about this big.
Yeah.
And I said, well, let me try it out. I pulled it in, plugged it in. Things sounded great. And I said, throwing it out, I'll take it. They said, it's yours. And that's what I'm using on tour. So it's this dumpster diving amplifier. I have my EA stuff is all out back in the States, and that's what I've been using with Toto, and that's what I would use with Phil if I go back out with him. But this is perfect for this because the intimacy of this stuff, I do not need to be loud.
No.
So this amp just kind of does the perfect little job. I could have brought my little micro EA amp and the single 12 that I can use with that. But it would have meant shipping it over and all this, and this thing's already here, and it's already the right voltage and all that. So I'm using that, but the thing is, it's really, you're really at the mercy of your mixer when it comes to this stuff, and they've got good ears. And the mixer we've been using with Judith, he can't do it now because Brian took him. But Davide, like when we gave him so much shit on the road because he ended up winning a European House Mixer of the Year award, so he was on the cover of the magazine. So we gave him so much shit every day. But apparently the new guy that's out here is supposedly great. So I'm confident with that. And we're doing the show we're doing today, and some gigs coming up. We're doing we have Gabby and then Megan on viola and Lizzie on violin. And me and Pedro. So it's almost like a little chamber group. Yeah. We rehearsed yesterday and it sounds great. It sounds great. And the thing with Judith, she's one of those kind of artists in the same way James Taylor was in all the years. They don't need us. She could sit at a piano and do her show, and she's entertaining enough personality-wise where she could carry it. They have a band because they think it makes it better. But they don't need it. So you have to be cognizant of that. And she's really, she's a treasure.
Do you find that that approach that she could do it on her own? Does that change your approach to how you play it? Maybe you're not pushing the bass issue.
I've always, for me, I've always recognized my position in these things. I've never had an ego about playing. I go into whatever the situation is. If it's Toto and I have to step to the front stage and I'm doubling stuff with Luke, I'm happy to do that. If I'm sitting with her and I'm just sitting back behind her in a chair, I was happy going out with Toto just to know that I could stand up and play again after a year of sitting in a chair. And suddenly I went from a 4-string sitting in a chair to 5-string standing and working a stage. So it's like.
Do you find you have to change when you go from? Because I know you predominantly a 5.
Well, my preference is a 4.
Oh, is it?
I'm an old school, but I always figure you use the best tool for whatever you're doing, and so much. I ended up having to play a lot of 5-string because, especially in this day and age. So much of what I do is replacing synth bass. And every guy that plays synth bass has a left arm about 18 inches longer than his right arm, so they're always down on the bottom of the keyboard doing all their programming. And I never really found a 5-string that I was really happy with. And then about 14 years ago, I was at a NAMM show, and Sheldon Dingwall came walking up to me and said, would you try one of my basses? And he handed it to me, and I looked at the thing with the fan fretting and all that. And I said, explain this to me, and it made total sense. I plugged it in, and within 30 seconds it was comfortable, and that's what I've been using ever since for 5.
I played a Z3 the other week, and basically I thought, well, if you tilt the neck so you're just looking along the side, if you're using the fret ends, nothing's changed.
Yeah,
it's only the visual of the sound.
Well, it's that, and if you're at the top of the neck and you look down at a dot, but you realize that the fingering is like a back cut, so you're maybe almost a half an inch that way.
Yeah.
And guys said to me, well, how do you deal with it? I said, don't look. Get used to it.
Have you seen his Explorer?
Yeah.
That he had that at the London Bass Show a couple of weeks ago.
He's a fantastic luthier. Yeah. I mean, his designs are amazing. I just had the most profound experience yesterday. A guy wrote to me on Facebook and was talking about a friend of his, and he said, this guy was a bass player. He had ordered one of my signature Dingwall basses, and they were waiting for it, and he got diagnosed with cancer. And he's in the hospital, and they gave him 5 days to live. But this was about like a month and a half ago, and the bass just arrived, and he sent me a picture of the guy sitting in the hospital bed playing the bass. So I got back to the room last night, and I filmed a video and sent it to the guy, just telling him, just wishing him,
Still alive.
He's still alive.
Oh, okay.
And the other guy wrote back, and he said the guy's on cloud nine. He's like freaking out over. So those moments where just something as simple as an instrument can really do something profound.
Yeah.
And but in my heart of hearts, like with Judith, I'm just playing my star bass 4-string, and it's perfect for this gig. And if I was going out with Lyle Lovett or somebody, I'd probably use it for that, even though it got into a 5-string with him, but it's not necessary.
And is the what I call the Franken Fender still making?
Oh, absolutely. But I just don't like taking it on the road, so it's sitting at home. But I'll tell you that Warwick is amazing. As soon as I plugged it in, I just went, "This is amazing," and I've used it on almost every record I've done since I got it.
You're one of the prominent users, I think, along with Guy Pratt.
Yeah. I go on YouTube and I go on Facebook videos, all the bass sites and all that, and all I see is guys flailing away on bass, just just popping away, and usually sitting over an E and doing all this amazing stuff. And I said, I don't see anybody playing a song. I said, this stuff might impress your friends, and I appreciate the work that you've put into it, being able to do all kinds of triple and all this stuff. But I said, unless you're doing a solo album of that, nobody's going to hire you for anything. I said, I can walk in, and I'm happy to play a whole note. It's not embarrassing at all. I said, now how are you going to play that whole note? What kind of tone do you have? Because some of these guys have crap tone. They have the fret buzzing. They're not even fingering well.
Spent £10,000 on gear.
Yeah, and their whole sound is based around their rack and their pedal board. But I just said, look at, here's, and then what I would do is I would play an example of everything from playing, Cobham to Livingston Taylor, where Steve Gadd and I do this song called "If I Was a Cowboy," and it is the most simple. It's all half notes, the whole thing, but it's the feel of it. And I said, that's what's going to get you work. I said, there may be a few groups that'll hire you just for that completely mind-blowing chop sing, but if you want to have a long-term career, that stuff's transitory. Well, I remember Hal Blaine told me he did a gig down in San Diego, and there was this young hot bass player in the area was on this gig, and he pulled out all the stops and just played all his shit. And after the gig was over, he went up to Hal and said, what do you think? And Hal looked at him and said, I think we need a bass player. It's
exactly
a little deflating.
That was what I was meant to be doing.
You really have to be, for me, I've built my whole career on songs. Even when I was in rock bands, it was all about songs, really strong writing, and that's why I've always been I've loved prog and stuff, where I've loved Brand X and King Crimson and all those kind of bands, but I loved Hendrix and Cream and all that. But then when I started with James Taylor and Jackson Browne, those guys, you suddenly with these amazing songwriters, and you have to figure out, what do I do to make this song a better song? And bringing all that stuff in wouldn't do it. So I told all these kids at these clinics and stuff, I said, and at the Warwick thing, I said, there's guys in other rooms that are going to show you all that stuff. You sit with Victor Wooten in a room, and you're going to be pretty blown away by what this guy can do. But he also can just go in and play a song. So, it's not like he's depending on all these chops. So don't stay focused on this. And I would talk about all this, and then I would leave, and I'd look back in after, and the guys are all sitting there. It's like a bunch of monkeys jacking off.
It does sometimes come across as people think the boring stuff is exactly that, boring.
Yeah.
But actually, that is your meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
That's what's going to earn you your money.
Yeah. But that's why so many of them aren't going to make it.
Sure. Because they don't grasp that.
Yeah, they don't grasp that concept. But you're a bass player. You're the foundation. You've got to establish that, and you're the liaison between the drums and everything else. So make that a powerful statement, but you don't have to.
On the Judith album, there's some upright on "I Know Why the Sun Shines." Is that you?
That is not upright. on that. That's my star bass with an OC2 octave divider.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fretless or fretted? It sounds fretless.
It sounds very fretless the way. I think that what I had Dave do was put a little tiny bit of pitch shift on it when they mixed it. So it's got a little of that nuance. It's got a little bit more of a warble.
It's still got your mandolin wire for the frets.
Oh, that's on everything. That's on everything. The only upright on it, Harry played. On one of the other songs, I forget, I don't remember the titles at this point. It's like a blur. I'm still living in detoxing from Toto land.
You've been Lucatherized.
I taught that schmuck everything he knows. I've known Luke since he was 19 years old, so we go way back. But Harry, I know, played upright on one of the tracks.
Okay.
So, but everything else was pretty much that. I think I might. I just can't remember on that because I had my Washburn AB45 with me, which I almost threw that bass away when I got it. It was a fretted bass and it sounded like crap. And as an experiment, I pulled the frets out and made it a fretless, and it turned into a great bass. Just didn't want to be a fretted bass.
Right. I've got a 40, which is
I have a 40
great.
Also. They're really, it's a real sweet instrument. You can't get them anymore.
No,
I think.
I know.
Yeah, those are old instruments.
The one with the controls on the body, not on the.
Yeah, I have the same ones.
side.
They're down in the side ones, like
with
Fishman
the
or
slots
something.
on the front.
Yeah, that Fishman stuff was real crap. I don't like that. So that's great. And the 45 just really was great. It almost sounds like a mini mode. It's got such this weird quality.
Very woody.
Yeah, very. So I did one project for a guy named Steve Kowalczyk, kind of a jazz singer, like a pre-Bublé and that kind of stuff. Really unique guy. And he was, and I told this story when I was at Berkeley, and he yelled from the back. He said, "That was my album." I hadn't seen him since then, so it was like years later. Suddenly, the guy said, but. Ahmet Erdogan was producing it, and they wanted it to be upright. And I said, I've got an upright, but I don't play it enough to really do this. But I said, I have this thing, and I brought it in, and they loved it. So I ended up using it on that.
Did you use a string mute on it?
No, it really. I used the black tapeworm strings on it.
The Road Sound through
or Labella or whoever. One of those companies makes that. There's a few of them out there, but there was still two tracks that really needed upright. And this was when Patitucci still lived in L.A., so I said, let me just call John. I'll just hang out. My clock's over. Let's just take... And we had a great hang-on, so... Okay. Go ahead.
Good. Okay, any gear changes in the past 2 years?
Nope.
Cool. That's that one done.
Let me just think real quickly before
I don't think you've had anything bass-wise.
No, nothing bass-wise. I've had a bunch of companies sending me pedals to try out, and I haven't even had time to try them out. I really don't care about pedals very much, so I got probably 200 of them sitting in boxes and stuff. I keep meaning to put on eBay and stuff and just unload.
Sure.
But some of them I've given to guys. There's a guitar player in town who just, every time I walk in, it's like walking into like a time machine, seeing all this stuff. So I had like these old Tycho Brahe pedals that were still in the wooden boxes and old Fox pedals, and I just gave them all to him. I just said, man, just enjoy. He was like creaming over it. But I know some of the stuff's worth money, but I'd rather just see it in the hands of somebody who loves the stuff. If I needed my pedals to save my ass financially now, I'd be really screwed up my career really bad. But I thought about bringing some stuff out, and when I saw Toto, Hungate was using an octave divider on a bunch of the stuff, and I said to Luke, "Do I really need to do that?" And he said, "Do whatever you want." And to me, the songs didn't have an octave divider originally. So,
what do you think of the new album?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
These guys are such strong writers. It's really fun. Luke was so embarrassed. He goes, I ended up playing bass on some stuff. I said, Luke, I've heard you play drums and piano. You would embarrass everybody.
You play bass on Beat It, don't you?
Yeah, I really could care less.
Yeah.
But no, their body of work has just been so amazing over all the years, where to me they deserve so much respect, and that's what pisses me off in the States. They get so little respect. Yet half the hit records of decades that people loved is those guys, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah. What inspires you musically? What keeps you being creative? Because you've been there, you've seen it, you've done it, you've worn the T-shirt. It's
still haven't got it right. You know, every day is a new adventure. I think it's just the quest for the unknown. You know, I mean, I don't want to be somebody who rests on their laurels. I get people that come up and talk about, like, man, I went on, you know, All Music or one of those sites, and man, your discography is like pages and pages. I go, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything to me. Yeah, I said the only thing that matters is the gig today and what am I doing tomorrow.
Yeah.
So as long as I keep that kind of going, and I have sort of a personal mantra that I try to keep is don't become an old fart. Because there's way too many times where I'm around guys and they're just sitting there reminiscing about things and talking, you know, like if I'm in the studio, I don't talk about analog and oh man, yeah. If I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of guys that have never heard analog, I just sound like an old fart talking about it as compared to digital. Now, if they say, what was it like, then I'm happy to talk and educate and the like. But I think it's just the idea that I'm kind of blown away that I'm not out at pasture at this point. I mean, it's shocking, you know, when you think you were like 20 when you started all this, you know, hitting the road and doing this and thinking, man, if I get 10 years out of this will be great, and it's almost 60 years. Or 70, or you know, 50 years now. Well, I believe he was the bassist when we played with James Taylor the first Rock in Rio festival.
Yeah, 85?
Yeah, and we preceded Queen on that show, and I just... all I have to say is it took me a day to lift my jaw off the floor. I'm such a huge Queen fan, and to me, Queen isn't just Freddie. Queen was a band, and I just, I love them. You know, I sat kind of just with mouth agape watching one of the most professional shows I've ever seen. And he created some beautiful bass parts on that. And that's all I can think. Okay. I mean, there's only a couple of bands that really have that kind of status.
Yeah.
And they certainly were. And he was probably, I mean, for a guy who was not an extrovert, was probably one of the greatest frontmen. I mean, it's just the dichotomy of Freddie offstage.
Polar opposite.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I remember seeing Bowie, you know, during like the White Tour and stuff, and you just see guys, or even Jagger, you know. I mean, to me, that's a different thing. But there's certain guys that are just kind of born to be on stage. That's their space. James Brown is that way. You just kind of go. You see these people that are so uncomfortable when they're up there, yet you see these guys that's their whole comfort zone.
Yeah.
Is just being up there.
You have to be there.
Yeah, and when they walk off stage, the greatest thing like that I ever saw was when I was doing this Tracy Chapman tour. We ended up flying to Vigo, Spain, to do a festival. And before we went on, Celia Cruz and Tito Puente's big band were playing, which was like... But when Celia came out, she was like probably a couple of years before she passed away, so she's probably in her 80s at this point. And they open up this trailer, and this ancient old mummy basically comes out, and these guys are on each side helping her to the stage. When that light hit her, she was 17 years old, ate that stage like it was breakfast, blew in 25,000 people's minds, and tore it up, walked off stage, folded up, and they helped her back to the... I've never seen a transformation, but that's the elixir. Man, these people, no matter what they're like there, when they hit that, it's like showtime.
Holy place.
Yeah, it really is amazing.